Good evening, colleagues, and welcome to our bite-sized session on the Race Relations Act 60th anniversary. We're going to have a bit of a look at some of the kind of pretext in relation to what went on, what led to the law being introduced. If I could ask you, please, all to make sure you're on mute. Just a quick introduction from me. My name's Fevzi Hussain. It's on the screen. I'm a policy assistant in the Equality, Education and Development Department. Good to see some of my colleagues on the screen as well. Yeah, if I can ask you to keep your mics on mute, please. We will have questions and observations at the end. So I'd answer if you could just hold fire throughout the presentation, and then any questions or comments you have at the end, that would be great. There should be closed captions facility as well. I know it's not ideal, but please feel free to use that. And most importantly as well, let's make sure that we have the debate in a respectful way, so that we have dignity and respect at the core of everything that we say. So, right, I'm going to share the presentation with you now. We're due to go on for presentation will run for about 30 minutes. It's like I said, it's bite size. It's a new platform that we're piloting. Phil Cherrington, who on the screen is facilitator two. Kate Hudson asked us to put this together, and Phil will be on session 2, which will be running next Thursday at 6 p.m. So I will be reminding you to get this date and time in your diary. Right, let's start. Can you all see that? Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you for the thumbs up. Okay, so I think what I want to start off with is just a little bit of context in relation to the Race Relations Act, because it didn't, politicians didn't just wake up one morning and decide, let's bring in a Race Relations Act. There was a lot going on beforehand in the build up to the Race Relations Act becoming law. And we're going to give you a bit of an insight into what some of those issues were. I will state as well, some of the information that we're going to share, it will be upsetting in nature. Unfortunately, race relations over the years in the United Kingdom has been difficult. The optics haven't been great, still not great, especially now, but we'll go into that a bit more. So I am giving you a little bit of a trigger warning in relation to some of the references to pieces of history that is likely to be upsetting. So the earliest reference really that we want to start off with, that we feel is relevant to this discussion, is the transatlantic slave trade. There was an estimated 12 million people that were forcibly moved from Central and West Africa to the Americas. We can see that the illegal and inhumane slave trade laid the foundations for systematic racism and colonial exploitation. Colonial exploitation, if you look at the next picture around the British Empire, it reinforced many of the isms and schisms that we see today. At its height, Britain colonized around 60 different countries. I think there's a map available online, which is quite frightening in terms of where the reach of the empire went out to. And one example I want to share with you, which some of you will know about, which sums up the hallmark of British Empire and occupation, is something called the Crawling Order. Some of you might have heard about the Crawling Order, but most of you will probably be scratching your head wondering, what is the Crawling Order? People in India will know exactly what this was. and it's linked with the Jallianwala Bagh massacre in Amritsar. The crawling order was in place for just over a week, I believe, at around the time of the massacre. And this order is effectively one of the symbols of brutality of the British colonial rule in India. And if you look prior to that period with the Race Relations Act coming in, the signs that you'd see in many windows of the pubs, this was a really common poster. It wasn't just windows of pubs. It was used in other places as well. And I think the things in the way, but the 1963 Bristol bus boycott was absolutely pivotal in relation to the Race Relations Act becoming law. So coming back to the Act was the first legislation in the UK to address racial discrimination and make it unlawful to refuse housing, employment, or public services on the basis of race. And it served as a foundation for the more comprehensive Race Relations Act of 1968, which strengthened protections against racial discrimination and established the Race Relations Board to enforce the law. We know it's not a perfect piece of law. There is still systematic discrimination. There's racial injustice across all parts of society, but the Race Relations Act, like other laws linked to the protected characteristics, was a truly historic piece of law. After World War II, Britain saw a significant influx of migrants from the Commonwealth countries, particularly the Caribbean, South Asia, and Africa. And these communities, often referred to as the Windrush generation, faced widespread racism in housing, employment, and public life. It's widely acknowledged that the migration of these people was fundamental to the success of services such as the National Health Service, British Transport, and many other sectors. Events like the Notting Hill riots in 1958 and the Bristol bus boycott, which is referenced below with the image, exposed the depth of racial hostility and exclusion. These incidents galvanized public awareness and political pressure for change. So as we go through the presentation, one of the things I want you to constantly ask yourselves is how far have we come in relation to race relations? Reflect on some of your own experiences. Reflect on what you know of your parents' experiences, because that's what your parents have been through. Those difficult journeys, and consider how far society has come in terms of race relations. So what we're going to do now, we're going to sort of go. We're going to touch on immigration. I think it would be remiss of us not to do this, especially in the current hostile environment with everything going on with the rhetoric. We see what immigration brings to the UK, all of the positive things, the brilliant things around the diversity of immigration. But we want to show you a couple of quick video clips of politicians. One is this one, which is Enoch Powell's River of Blood speech, which was 50 years ago. And then we're going to show you a second video. So a couple of short videos.
This country, in 15 or 20 years' time,
can you hear that?
The black man will have the whip hand over the white man.
It's a speech which, 50 years on, still rears its head when the topic of immigration is raised. On the 20th of April 1968, the Conservative MP Enoch Powell spoke against mass immigration at the party's political centre in Birmingham in what is known as the Rivers of Blood speech. The speech was critical of the Race Relations Bill, which later that year became an Act of Parliament. The new legislation made it illegal to refuse housing, employment and public services to people on the basis of race. Powell believed it would be used to discriminate against the established white population. Reaction to the speech was swift, with party leader Edward Heath removing Powell from his post as Shadow Defence Secretary, citing the speech's inflammatory nature and the risk of damage to race relations.
It is like watching a nation busily engaged in heaping up its own funeral pyre.
However, Powell's sentiments were shared by many voters, and the speech is believed to have been a decisive factor in the Conservatives' 1970 general election victory. Only 4 years later, the Wolverhampton MP had left the party in protest at the government's decision to take Britain into the then European Economic Community. The Rivers of Blood speech is also linked with the increase in hostility and violence towards immigrants and coincided with the formation and rise of the far-right National Front Party. Although Powell sought a moderate approach to the issue of immigration, the language he used appealed to the ethnic nationalist and racial separatist views of the NF.
Do you feel that any of the support for him may be because people feel that he was standing up and speaking his mind, rightly or wrongly, when so many politicians are felt to be mealy-mouthed on these controversial issues?
I think that he was, in fact, backed precisely because he appealed to the fear and the insecurity which has led to a deterioration in the relations between the races. I think this is demagogy and not leadership.
For some, Powell articulated the fears of millions of Britons who felt ignored by their elected representatives. For others, the speech was an incitement to racial hatred which pandered to ill-informed populist feeling.
So I think what's quite shocking is, we all ask ourselves, that was 60 years ago. And, where have we heard those words, before? When the political commentator says, for some, Powell represented the views of millions of Britons who felt neglected by the establishment. These things go in cycles. This is exactly what we're seeing now. The huge protest that we saw the other weekend, yes, that was a platform of hate. There's no doubt about it. But I think a lot of people acknowledge that it would be folly to suggest that all those people marching were racist or had racist ideology. A lot of them have been sucked in by disillusionment. So these things do go in cycles. But the narrative, it's almost word for word, the narratives of division that we're seeing played out today, which is demonizing the asylum seekers and refugees. So this is Keir Starmer. Labour Party is under a lot of pressure on immigration. Let's just quickly hear what he has to say on immigration.
From 5 years to 10, and enforcement tougher than ever, because fair rules must be followed. Now, make no mistake, this plan means migration will fall. That's a promise. But I want to be very clear on this. If we do need to take further steps, if we do need to do more to release pressure on housing and our public services, then mark my words, we will.
Okay, so if you remember that speech by Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, he made the reference as well to the island, us becoming an island of strangers, and there were worrying parallels with Powell's speech. On this particular slide, I think what we want to touch on, we hear this a lot, when we try and have a discussion and we try and have a dialogue with people who have views which may appear to be intolerant or bigoted. They normally say, I'm not racist, but how many times have we heard people say that? I'm just going to see if I can move this so you can see the quote. The quote on this slide says, I do feel sorry for refugees, but we don't have the housing, the teachers, or the health service capacity to cope with them. We have to look after our own first. When anyone says I'm not racist, or I'm not sexist, but it's likely to follow that the rest of the words that come out of the person's mouth will indeed testify to the fact that whilst we are not necessarily saying that the person is racist or sexist, what they're about to say probably will be. When someone starts a sentence with, "I'm not racist, but," it often signals that what follows might include a stereotype, a generalization, or a biased view, especially about race, ethnicity, or immigration. In the UK, this phrase has become a kind of cultural red flag, suggesting that the speaker may be about to express a controversial or prejudiced opinion whilst trying to shield themselves from criticism. So for the purpose of this slide, I will say actually there's a fantastic organisation called the Ella Baker School of Organising, and we've kindly used these two images from their resources. So thank you to John Page and Ella Baker for that. Definitely check them out because they do a lot of work around the narratives of division, because they're so key moving forward with this debate. So when a person talks about strain on public services and starts blaming immigration, how should we respond? I think it is a fair comment to make that our public services have never been under so much pressure. I think we can all acknowledge that. We know how difficult it is to get a GP appointment or a hospital appointment, or getting access to social housing, or getting that placement at the school of your choice for your kid. All these things and much more are genuine concerns that are being expressed. We need to acknowledge that. But getting back to conversations in the workplace, how do you respond to the points about asylum seekers living in hotels? There may be some validity in the points around the public services, but we've seen them being weaponized in a disgusting way to heap the blame on refugees and asylum seekers. More and more conversations are taking place in our workplaces. Research and surveys are showing that the working class are turning their backs on the mainstream political parties and looking for a voice that they feel represents them. What should we be saying to someone in these situations? We need to be ready for these conversations. How do we get them to understand that their best interests are not represented by extreme far-right populist political groups like Reform or Advance UK, which is the latest party being set up in the Northeast? We are all trade unionists. I know the vast majority of people on here are. I know there's some non-CWU people on this call as well, and you're all very welcome. And thank you for joining us. We are proud of our movement, and we need to be equipped for these types of conversations. Do you really believe that it's those vulnerable people crossing the English Channel, putting their lives at risk, that they're the reason why the NHS has struggled in recent times? Is it a fault of asylum seekers that social housing is under so much pressure, or that you can't get a GP appointment? On the difficult question of asylum seekers being put in hotels, there's no doubt that this is causing a lot of anger. We know the cost of this bill. It's been around £15 billion over the last 10 years. But what most people don't know is that when the Conservatives were in power, the speed of asylum applications being processed was so slow, deliberately so, knowing that more and more asylum seekers would need to be housed in hotels, which in turn pushes up the cost to the taxpayer, thus creating the perfect storm to try and bring in a more aggressive anti-immigration policy. So I think that I just wanted to touch on that because I think it's important that we begin to give a bit of a lead into some of those possible dialogues in the workplace. I know it's something that the CWU are focusing very, very heavily on. So, okay, look, I'm hoping to go on to about past, and then I will open it up for questions and observations. So Kelso Cochrane was a 32-year-old Antiguan carpenter who was tragically murdered in Notting Hill in London on the 17th of May in 1959. It became a pivotal moment in British race relations and civil rights history. He lived in Notting Hill, he worked as a carpenter, and he hoped to save enough money to attend law school. But he was attacked by a gang of white youths who stabbed him with a stiletto knife. No one was ever arrested or charged, fueling anger and mistrust in the Black community. And then here you have a young Anthony Walker. Anthony was a promising young Black British teenager whose life was tragically cut short in another racially motivated murder in 2005. Again, he was only 18 years old. He was an A-level student who had aspirations of becoming a lawyer. Anthony was ambushed by Michael Barton and Paul Taylor, two individuals with a history of racist behaviour. Since his murder, his mother and sister have set up the Anthony Walker Foundation, which raises awareness around racial injustice and is a real powerful force for change. Touched on Kelso Cochrane and Anthony Walker, and Stephen Lawrence pictured here with his mother, Doreen. Many of us will recall the situation around Stephen. Stephen was 18 as well, and he was murdered in a racially motivated attack on the 22nd of April in 1993 in Eltham, southeast London, whilst he was waiting for a bus with his friend Dwayne Brooks. I think people will remember the chaotic scenes at the entrance to the court, those who are old enough, and the conduct of the suspects, which to this day is still really regarded as one of the most shameful episodes we've seen in race relations. And I would ask you to look into the Macpherson report, which was commissioned by the Labour government of the time, 350 pages long. And it was the report which commissioned the phrase institutional racism within the Metropolitan Police. And the final picture is about Ricky Real. Ricky's case isn't as well known as the others, possibly. That's a picture of his mother, Sukhdev Real, holding the book Silence is Not an Option. Ricky, whose name was Lakhvinder Ricky Real, he was 20, a British Sikh student whose tragic death was in October 1997, and it's remained a deeply controversial and painful case for his family and community. He was out with his friends and they were racially abused by a group of white men in Kingston upon Thames. His body was found in the River Thames 7 days later. Now, Sukhdev is actually coming to Bournemouth to our National Equality event on the 15th and 16th of October. So she will give an incredibly powerful and moving account of what happened to her son, how she was treated by the establishment. It is quite shocking, but I think it's a story that needs to be heard. Her family was also spied on by the police. She's given evidence at the Spy Cops. And we've also got Spy Cops women who are going to be at our conference as well. So do get the book, Silence is Not an Option, if you want to find out more about the incredible struggle. She's a truly inspirational woman, Sukhdev Real, and we are really lucky that she's going to be gracing our equality event. It's actually going to be 25 years, I think, to the day on the first day of the conference that she last saw Ricky. So it's going to be quite emotional. Okay, that brings me to the end of the presentation. Apologies for the technical hiccup. But yeah, just a reminder to register for the next Bite Size workshop, which is next week, same time, 6 p.m. On Thursday. Phil's going to be holding the fort next week, and the session will be on historical disputes and Black organising. So on that note, I will open the session. We've got about 10 minutes or so for any questions or observations. Over to you. Put your hand up if you use the react button if you want to say anything. Mark, and then I'll bring Peter in, and then Michelle.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for that. The only two bits I'd like to raise is you talked about the Rivers speech, but you don't talk about the shameful trade unions that supported it all and going out of their way to stop black people from actually working on the buses and being to do their daily lives. And also with the Race Relation Act, is the caste discrimination still not part of the race? I know there was talk about going to be put into law, but I don't know if that actually got through. Maybe you could just talk about that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I'll bring in Peter and Michelle, and then I'll respond all in one go, if that's okay. Peter, over to you.
Yeah, hi everybody. So I just come back to the sort of current affairs with race-related stuff. It's obviously front and center everywhere at the moment, I can't profess to be any expert on race relations per se. I'm a southern white middle-aged guy, but I know my history well enough to see the recurrence. And you talked about it being cyclical, but it essentially it just doesn't go away. And I see in regards to the recent events in Southport especially, but I suppose really running through from Brexit ultimately and the run up to that, we're doing the same things in response. And I don't have any fantastic magic wand. I wish I did, but how do we break that cycle, I guess, is my question. It's open.
It's a nice, easy one for me to answer then. Thanks for that, Peter. Michelle.
Yeah, thanks for that presentation, Febsy. Got two sort of forward questions. Are you going to distribute the slides? Because the Midlands area have been asking me if I attend, are we able to get copies of the slides? And the second part to my question is, does the Education Department have any data or trends on where we've had to use the Race Relations Acts with cases of discrimination with regards to race? Because if people are familiar and more used to the ins in this, I think it could be very useful if they know their details and facts. So thanks for that.
Yeah, good questions. Shaky, I'll bring you in. I'll just respond to the points quickly. Mark, you're absolutely right that, the trade unions at the time, they supported the colour bar, the jobs on the buses. They wouldn't employ the, people of colour, anyone of colour, for the jobs that were paying slightly more money, and they were just kept for the white person, so to speak. And that was kind of one of the reasons the gentleman in Bristol who went for the job, they didn't know that he was black when he applied on the telephone, and when he turned up, they said, "Oh, the job's gone." And then, the Bristol bus boycott happened, and it was a really defining moment in race relations. But you're right, Grunwick as well. Whilst it's a fantastic campaign that Jayaben Desai ran, there's elements in that campaign that the trade union movement really don't come out smelling of roses. General secretaries walking over Jayaben and other people on Grunwick, people on hunger strike. They are memories that will not go away. So very, very important to make that point. And on caste discrimination, I think the Equality Act is obviously race is a protected characteristic, and I think someone clever potentially could articulate an argument if there's a racial less favourable treatment. which may be linked to caste. But then obviously race would need to be the overriding factor. So I don't think that there's a lot of cases around caste that I'm aware of, if I'm being honest with you, going to tribunal. But if the Equality Act is up for grabs, so to speak, I do agree with you. I think that injustice needs to be addressed. Peter, the question on how we break that cycle, that's whenever there's problems with the economy, this cost of living crisis, there's always this othering that goes on. And I think that the unions have got a really big role to play in terms of education. And I know our department is doing quite a lot of work with organisations to try and just help people on this narratives of division, and making sure we can have that discussion and debate, so people understand that we shouldn't be pushing those narratives and the horrible anti-immigration rhetoric. But that's a really big question, and I think that's a question that the union collectively have got to try and do something about. And Michelle, yeah, definitely the slides. I believe that our intention is to share this as a resource. It's being recorded. So our person who deals with the website, Paul Dovey, is on this call, and Paul will take care of that, I'm sure. So hopefully within the next few days it will be, and I know Kate's plan is to make sure that all 4 sessions are there as a resource, even the one in person in Bournemouth that I think Amarjit Singh is going to do, the one with Phil. So yeah, fingers crossed. Shaky, did you want to have a quick question and then we'll wrap it up?
You said earlier, has anything changed from the early days to now? I don't think it has. It's evolved. It's not just about racism towards migrants or Asian or black or any ethnicity. There's racism within Asian communities. We get the racism, like I'm from India, my parents were born in India. I get it from the Pakistani community, I get it from the Hindus, the Sikhs, and it's the same with the Bangladeshi community. They get it from the others. So it hasn't changed, it's evolved, and it started happening within the Asian communities as well. It's not just about us and them, it's about where you come from in the Asian community. And we had an issue 10 years ago in Birmingham Mail Centre where certain communities from Pakistan attacked the Indian Muslims, and several people got sacked, and it was a police case as well.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately racism has many faces. You're absolutely right. And I know anecdotally from speaking to lots of people in my family, friends, people who are on this call tonight, there's a genuine fear around how we feel, in terms of our connection with the UK. It's as though some people feel that they are being deliberately isolated, almost being pushed out. So, but the movement has got a lot of work to do. I think the other unions are just as committed as the CWU. There is a lot of work to do, but we will carry on doing it. I think the final point I want to close on is, we've got to look at the narrative around class as well, because it isn't just race. You speak to a white family in a council estate who are on a breadline in poverty. We've got to try and bring everyone up. So those are the discussions that we're having. But TUC is keen to move this along. Like I said, there's organisations like the Ella Baker School of Organising, Journey to Justice. These organisations are all really on the ball, and we've got to work more closely with them to try and engage, get out to the workplaces, so the members feel confident to have the conversations. Because that's something we've got to do. But thank you everyone for joining the bite-sized session. It's our very first one, and hopefully there's going to be more to follow on different subjects. So I hope you all enjoyed it, and just do put it in your diary for next Thursday at 6 p.m, where we'll be looking at sort of wider disputes and black organising. For those of you who need to travel home, have a safe journey home. Thanks for joining us.